Before anything strange entered her life, before the rain that would not behave like ordinary rain, before the fog and the fear and the questions, Eseosa's world was a small one. It was a village just outside Benin City in the year 1912, when the days still moved by sun and shadow, and people measured time more by habit. Morning there did not begin all at once. It gathered slowly. First, a rooster from one compound would crow, then another would answer from farther off. Somewhere, a woman would already be outside, tying her wrapper properly before bending over the firewood she had arranged the night before. Smoke would begin to rise, thin at first, then thicker, carrying the smell of damp wood, palm oil, and something peppery warming in a pot. From another yard came the heavy, steady sound of yam being pounded. Not fast, not hurried, just the same old rhythm that belonged to morning. Children's voices came and went. A baby cried and was quickly hushed. Goats shifted against their fettering ropes and stamped at flies. The rough earth, still cool from the night, kept the marks of bare feet, broomstroke, and yesterday's person. This was the world Eseosa knew. Nothing in it was grand. Nothing in it announced itself as history. It was simply life, lived one small task at a time. Eseosa lived with her parents in a modest mud house that sat inside a swept compound, a little away from the noisier part of the village. The walls had been smoothed over by hand so many times that in some places they had the faint memory of palms and fingers in their shape. In the dry season, the clay lightened and cracked a little near the bottoms. In the rains, it darkened and gave off that deep earth smell that always made the whole house feel cooler inside. The roof was thatched, though one side had been mended where the wind had worried it loose the year before. Near the doorway stood a large clay pot of water with a calabash cover resting over its mouth. Beside it was a small wooden stool, worn, shining in the middle from use. Her father often sat there in the evenings. The yard was her mother's pride. It was swept every morning until the ground looked almost patterned with clean arcs from the broom. Near one wall, bundles of firewood were stacked carefully to keep them dry. A mortar stood under the shade of a tree. A few cooking pots had been turned upside down after washing. Nothing expensive, nothing unnecessary, but everything had its place. Inside, the house was dim even in daylight. Not dark in a frightening way, just cool and quiet, with light entering gently through the doorway and the small spaces where the wall met the roof. There were mats rolled to one side, folded clothes, calabashes, and the ordinary things of a home where people worked with their hands and did not keep more than they needed. This was the house where Eseosa had grown, from child to woman. This was where her mother often called her in from the yard, where her father had taught her to sound out English words one by one, where evening prayers were said low and simple before sleep to their gods. There was nothing special about it to a stranger's eye, but to Eseosa, it was the shape of safety. Her mother, Efe, was not a woman people describe with many words, but everyone knew the kind of person she was. She was steady. The sort of woman who could be sick and still wake before others, who could be worried and still remember who had not yet eaten. She did not waste speech. When she called your name, it was either because something needed doing or because she had already noticed what you thought you had hidden. Most mornings, Eseosa would always find her crouched near the cooking fire, blowing gently into it until the wood caught properly. The firelight moved against her face and arms. Her wrapper would be tied firmly, and one end of it had been tucked in at the waist so it would not get in her way. She would lift the lid, stir the pot, add something, and then cover it again. It was work she had done for so long that her hands no longer needed thoughts for it. Her father, Pa Eseosa Aigbe, was a different kind of quiet. People respected him, not because he was rich or because he carried any title, but because he carried himself with care. He did some work with the white colonial officers and missionaries who had been moving more steadily through the areas in those years, and because of that, he had picked up some English, not enough to make him proud, but enough to make him useful. He understood, perhaps more than some others in the village did, that things were changing. That understanding sat on him like a private burden. He did not say all of his thoughts aloud, but now and then they slipped out in small ways. In how he looked at his daughter when she read, in how he kept old missionary papers instead of throwing them away, in how he sometimes sat longer than usual in the evening, as though listening for something beyond the night sounds. Eseosa was 19, though there were days she seemed younger and days she seemed older. She was not the kind of girl who entered the place and made everyone turn at once. Other girls had that gift. Some had laughter that carried far. Some had a boldness that made them easy to notice. Eseosa was easier to miss at first, but only at first. There was a stillness to her that made people look again. She had soft brown skin and thoughtful eyes that seemed always to be taking something in, not judging, just noticing. When older people spoke, she listened properly. When children cried, she was often the first to turn and soothe them. When her mother sighed without saying she was tired, Eseosa heard it and always tried to help. She did not talk just to fill the silence. She got that from her mom. She did not like noise for its own sake. Even as a child, she had been like that. The sort who would stop in the middle of an errand because she had noticed the sky changing or because a bird had fallen quiet all at once. Some people called that sensitivity. A few called it oddness. Her mother used to say only, "That girl feels things deeply." And that was true. Evenings in their compound had their own rhythm. By the time the sun lowered and the heat softened, the work of the day had already settled into people's bones. The village grew quieter, not silent, but calmer. Voices dropped and movement slowed. That was when her father liked to sit outside. The small wooden stool would be placed near the doorway, where the last light could still reach. Sometimes he said nothing for a long time, just watch people pass and watch the sky change. Then, as if remembering something, he would unfold the same booklet. The pages were worn and slightly bent at the corners. Some parts had faded, but he handled it carefully like it still mattered. "Eseosa," he would call, not loudly. She always heard. She would come and sit beside him, sometimes on the ground, sometimes on the edge of the bench if he still shifted to make space. He would point to a line, "Read." She would lean closer, her brows pulling together slightly. The word did not always come easily. Go. She would begin slowly, tracing the letters with her fingers. Go into all. She paused. All the. Her father waited. The world, she finished unsure. He nodded once again. Again. She smiled a little under her breath. "You will not say it for me?" she asked. "If I say it, will you learn it?" he replied. She shook her head, still smiling. Then she tried again. Um, Go into all the world. The sentence came smoother this time. Her father gave a small sound of approval, not praise exactly, just acknowledgement. Sometimes she stumbled badly. Sometimes she got impatient and laughed at the strange way the words sounded in her mouth. "This one does not sound like a real language, oh," she said once, half complaining. "It is a real language," he replied. "You are just not used to it." She tilted her head slightly. "It bends the tongue, Papa. It will straighten with time." She looked at the page again. "Why must I learn it?" she asked, not resisting, just asking. He did not answer immediately. He looked out towards the path for a moment, then back at her. "Because the world is changing, oh," he said quietly, "and I do not want it to leave you behind." She did not fully understand what he meant, but she remembered the way he said it. There was a small chapel built by the missionaries that stood near the edge of the village, where the houses thinned and the land opened a little more. It was not a place that drew attention. If you were not looking for it, you could pass it without noticing. The walls were made of mud, like the houses, though not as carefully finished. The roof was zinc, brought in by the missionaries, and when the sun was high, it shone and it held heat in a way that made the air inside heavy. The benches were ruffled, uneven in places, and sometimes they shifted slightly when people sat on them. There was no decoration worth mentioning, no bright clothes, no carvings, just a space. Some people went, some did not. Some went only to see what the white people were saying. Others went because they had begun to believe something in those words. A few went because they were curious and had not yet decided what to think. Eseosa went because she listened. The first time she entered the church, she had not planned to stay. She had followed at a distance, more out of curiosity than intention. She stood near the back at first, her eyes moving quietly over the room, taking everything in. A woman spoke that day, not loudly, not forcefully, just steadily, and this reminded Eseosa of her mother. Eseosa did not remember everything that was said, but she remembered the feeling of it. It was not like the stories she had growing up hearing, where gods were distant and needed to be appeased carefully and frequently. This was different. This was someone speaking as if God was near, as if he listened, as if he could be known, as if he could guide a person's life if they trusted him. She began returning after that, not every day, not always for the full gathering, but often enough that the place became familiar. She would sit somewhere in the middle, not too close to the front, not too far back. Her hands would rest quietly in her lap. Her eyes would follow whoever was speaking, and she would listen, not because she had already decided, but because something in her would not let her ignore it. On the day she stayed behind, the day was not different in any obvious way. Eseosa was 15 years old now, and she would never forget that day. The heat sat low inside the chapel as it usually did. The zinc roof held it in, and the air felt still, like it did not want to move. People had come in small numbers, a few women, two older men, some children who could not sit for long as children usually did. Eseosa sat where she often did, not at the front, not at the back, but somewhere in between. She listened as she always did, but that day something stayed with her longer than usual. It was not a loud feeling, not something that pushed or frightened her. If anything, it was quiet, but it did not go away. The woman who spoke that day did not raise her voice. She did not try to convince anyone. She spoke about Jesus in a way that sounded close, as if he was not far, as if he could hear. Eseosa found herself sitting very still, not because she was trying to be serious, but because leaving suddenly felt like she would be walking away from something she had not yet understood. When the meeting ended, people stood slowly. Some stretched, some spoke to each other in low voices. Children moved towards the doorway first, eager to be outside. Eseosa stood too, but she did not leave. She stepped aside, letting others pass. One by one, the room emptied. The sounds from outside grew louder again. Voices, footsteps, everyday life returning. Inside the chapel, it became quiet. The woman who had spoken was gathering a few things near the front. Eseosa watched for a moment. Then she walked forward, not quickly, not confidently either, just putting one foot in front of the other. The woman noticed her before she spoke. Yes, she said gently. Eseosa hesitated. For a second, it felt like the words she had in her mind had disappeared. Then she said it in the only way she could. I want to know, this God you are talking about. She paused, then added a little softer, I want to know him for myself. The woman did not seem surprised. She did not rush her. She nodded slightly, as if she had heard this before. What is your name? She asked. Esosa. The woman smiled faintly. That is a good name. Esosa lowered her eyes a little. My mother gave it to me, she said. The woman moved closer, but not too close. You have been listening, she said. It was not a question, as she had seen Esosa return to the chapel many times before. Esosa nodded. I hear, but I do not understand everything. You do not need to understand everything first, the woman replied. There was a small pause, then she continued simply. Do you believe he hears you? Esosa did not answer immediately. She thought about it, not deeply, just honestly. Yes, Esosa said. The woman nodded again. Then you can speak to him. Esosa brows pulled together slightly. Just like that? Yes. Another words. No big words, Esosa asked. The woman shook her head gently, smiling. No big words. They stood there for a moment. Then the woman said, I can help you if you want. Esosa nodded. They did not kneel immediately. The woman spoke first, slowly, in short sentences, not long prayers, not complicated one. She said a few words at a time, and Esosa repeated them. Lord Jesus, I have come here today to ask you to come into my life, to lead me, to be my lover and friend every day of my life. I believe you died for me, and I ask you to be Lord over my life. Amen. Sometimes Esusa got the word wrong. Sometimes she paused halfway. The woman did not correct her harshly. She just waited and let Esusa say it again. After a while, the woman stopped. You can speak to him yourself now, she said. Esusa looked at her unsure. Alone? Yes, the woman gave her a small nod, then stepped back. Not far, just enough. After a moment, she turned and walked towards the doorway. She did not stay to watch Esusa's conversation with God alone. The chapel felt different when she was alone. Not empty, just quiet. Esusa stood where she was for a moment. Then slowly she lowered herself onto her knees beside the bench. Her hands came together, then separated again. She did not know how to place them because she was nervous. She let them rest loosely by her side while using her right hand to clutch her rosary. For a few seconds, she said nothing. She was aware of her own breathing, aware of the stillness, aware that she was about to speak, and not sure how to begin. Jesus. The word felt new in her mouth. She paused, then tried again. Jesus, I do not know how to say it. I have been hearing about you, and I think I believe it. I think you hear me. I do not know everything they are saying, but I want to know you. I know I am not good all the time, but I want to be yours. They said you will not turn me away if I come, so I am coming. Please forgive me. Please help me. I do not know what to do after this, but I will learn. She stayed there a little longer, not because she had more words, but because she did not feel the need to stand up yet. When she finally opened her eyes, nothing in the room had changed. The same walls, the same bench, the same doorway. Outside, someone passed and laughed loudly. Life had continued, but something inside her had settled. She could not explain it. If someone had asked her what happened, she would not have the words. But she knew one thing clearly. She had not been speaking into emptiness. And for the first time, that knowing stayed. When Esosa stepped out of the chapel, the brightness outside made her pause for a moment. She stood just by the doorway, letting her eyes settle. Voices drifted past her from the path. Someone laughed. A child ran by, kicking up a little dust as they went. Nothing had changed. The village was moving the same way it always did. She adjusted her wrapper slightly and started walking towards home. The path felt familiar under her feet. She had walked it so many times, she no longer needed to think about where to place her steps. Still, that day, she found herself more aware of it. The warmth of the ground, now that the sun had risen higher, the faint sound of leaves shifting overhead, the way voices carried from one compound to another. Her thoughts were not as steady as her steps. They kept returning to what had just happened, though not in a clear way. It was not like she could repeat everything she had said or explain it properly. It was more of the feeling of it, the sense that something had begun, even if she could not name it yet. After a while, she spoke under her breath. Jesus. She said it quietly, almost testing the words outside the chapel. She walked a few more steps before her adding, You hear me. The sentence came out slowly as if she was choosing it carefully. She frowned a little thinking, I came today, she said after a moment, correcting herself softly. She remembered her father's voice from the evenings, the way he would make her repeat a word until it sat properly. That small memory made her smile, just briefly. Then, the smile faded, not out of sadness, but because her mind had already moved on. She did not keep talking, not because she had nothing to say, but because she did not feel the need to keep searching for the right words. The feeling she carried did not depend on whether she could explain it well, and that, more than anything, stayed with her as she walked till she got back home. By the time she reached home, the compound looked much the same as she had left it, which made her a bit disoriented. Because she felt transformed inside, her subconscious felt other things had changed also. Her mother was still near the fire, though the flames had settled into a steady heat. Something had already been taken off the pot and set aside. The smell of food lingered in the air, warm and familiar. You are back, her mother said, glancing up. Yes, Eseosa answered. There was nothing unusual in the exchange. Her mother's eyes rested on her a second longer than usual, as if she had noticed something she could not yet name. Then she turned back to what she was doing. Wash your hands, she said. Food is almost ready. Eseosa moved to the water pot and poured a little water over her hands. The coolness grounded her. She rubbed her palms together slowly, then rinsed again, letting the last of the water fall back into the earth before wiping her hands on her wrapper. She looked around for her father. He was not by the doorway. She found him a little to the side, where he kept his tools. He was working on something small, focused the way he often was when he wanted quiet. Papa, she called. He answered without looking up. I am back. I can see, he said, and then he turned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was not uncomfortable, just the kind of pause that happened when both people were noticing something, but had not yet decided how to speak about it. You stayed, he said finally. Yes. What did they say today? Eseosa took a small breath, thinking. They talked about Jesus, she said. Her father nodded once. What did you understand? She looked down briefly, then back at him. That he hears me, she said. It was the simplest way she could say it. Her father held her gaze for a moment longer than usual, then gave a small nod. That is good, he said. Eseosa turned to leave, then stopped. Papa, he looked at her again. I talked to him today. The words came out quietly, almost as if she was still deciding what they meant. Her father did not react quickly. Then he simply said, Good. He did not ask how, he did not ask what she said, but his voice carried something steady in it, something that made her feel that she had not spoken into something strange or wrong, and that was enough. From that day forward, prayer became as natural to her as breathing. Even her name reminded her of the God she believed in. Her mother had named her Eseosa after a difficult pregnancy that nearly took her life. When the baby was finally born safely, her mother had lifted her towards the sky and said, her name will be called Eseosa, because in their language it meant God has done well, God has answered. And so every time someone called her name, it reminded her of the God who listens. In the days that followed, as months turned into years, life continued in the same pattern. Morning came, work was done, evening settled. Nothing in the village changed in a way that others would point to. But inside Eseosa, something had shifted quietly into place. It showed itself in small things, in how she would pause before speaking, in how she would sing and smile all through the village, in how she did not take offense, and in how the same thoughts always returned to her again and again. God hears. It was around that time that Osahon's name began to come up more often in her house. At this time, Eseosa was 19 years old. At first, it came the way such things usually did, not directly. Her mother mentioned him in passing while walking. Osahon's mother came today or later. They say his farm is doing well this season. Eseosa would nod, listening but not asking questions. She knew what those conversations meant, even before anyone said it plainly. Then, one evening, her father called her, Eseosa. She came and sat beside him. Papa, you called. There was no booklet in his hand that day. That alone told her this was not about reading. Osahon has spoken, he said. Eseosa lowered her eyes slightly. She had expected it. Yes, Papa. He is a good man, her father continued. He works hard. He is strong. Everything he said was true. Eseosa knew it. She nodded. We talked about it, her father added. She answered the same way she always did. Yes, Papa. But later that night, when she lay down, sleep did not come easily. She turned once, then again, settling into the mat. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone had finished speaking for the day. She looked towards the doorway, though there was nothing to see. Then she closed her eyes. Jesus. The words came naturally this time because prayer had become second nature to her. I don't understand this one. You hear me, she said again, more certain now. Then after a pause, help me. She did not try to say more than that, but a question remained with her. Is this your will for me? That was when her prayers began to change. The missionary at the chapel had taught Eseosa how to pray, how to sing, and how to ask for things when she needed direction in prayers. And Eseosa had a beautiful voice for singing, so for whenever she prayed, she also sang. Before, when she spoke to God, it had been simple, mostly what she heard, what she remembered, what she could say without thinking too much. Now, she found herself speaking about things she did not understand and needed directions for. One night after everyone had settled, she lay on her mat and closed her eyes to pray. Jesus, she said it quietly. She was still for a moment, then she continued. You see me. It was not a question, just something she was beginning to accept. She shifted slightly, resting her head more comfortably. This matter, she paused, then said it differently. They are talking about marriage. The word sat differently in her mouth. I don't know. I don't know what is good. Papa said he is good. But if it is not your way, she stopped, adjusted the sentence. If it is not what you want, show me. Lead me. I don't know the road. She frowned slightly, then corrected herself again, remembering the right way to say it. I don't know the way. Make way for me. She did not try to say more, but after a moment she added one last thing, almost like she was making sure it was clear. Where you lead me, I will follow. Before she slept finally, she decided to sing her favorite song. What a friend we have in Jesus. all our sins and grief to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. She closed her eyes then, not because she was done, but because she felt she had said what she needed to say. The following days did not bring any clear answer. Morning still came the same way. Work still waited. Her mother still called her name when something needed to be done. Her father still sat in the evenings with the booklet, correcting her when she missed a word. One such evening, she pronounced "goed." Not "goed," he said once, tapping the page lightly. Went, she repeated it. Went. Again, Eseosa. Went. He nodded and she smiled slightly. "Papa, you like this English too much, oh," she said. "It will help you," he replied. She shook her head a little, but she kept reading. "Ask, and it shall be given to you." She paused. Look at the words again, then she read it once more carefully. "Ask, and it shall be given to you." Her father watched her, did not interrupt. After a moment, she said quietly, "This one, I understand small." He gave a small nod. She did not explain further, but the word stayed with her, that when she asks, it shall be given unto her.